I think if someone's temporal future, either in a gas chamber or through lethal injection or life in prison, is at stake, and this is the criteria we use, why couldn't we use that criteria to look at someone's eternal destiny?
So I have a brother who's very, very skeptical. He's actually a religious pluralist.
Okay.
So he doesn't buy into that Jesus was who he claimed to be, that he's kind of just more an important figure. And, one thing because we don't have these conversations too often, because I don't want to seem like I'm forcing something on him.
But kind of family, it's harder, right? It's hard. Yeah. No prophet's respected in his hometown, so I get it. So.
Yeah. But so one of the things he kind of threw at me was, because he knows how much time I've put into studying this stuff.
Yeah.
And he was, but have you done this? Have you read the entire Quran? Have you studied all the religions? Because maybe if you put all the same effort you've put into studying Christianity into all these other religions, it would be a different ballgame. But he seemed to think it was too much of an overwhelming bias, because I've concluded that Christ is who he was. But
and you stopped there. You didn't go on and do the Book of Mormon, Buddhism. You didn't do Hinduism.
I do
Islam.
To an extent. You have an hour video on YouTube about Mormonism, and I've looked into that and taken notes.
Right.
But sir, you're right. So not to the degree that I spend in the New Testament, for example.
Sure. So maybe you missed something. Maybe if you'd have done the same work you did in the. So here's how I always look at it. And again, all my analogies go back to criminal work, because it seems to me that we have this active laboratory for epistemology. How do we know? How do we learn what we learn? How do we know what is true? How do we know what we know? And we have a place we do that every day. We test these theories. We test arguments. We test evidential approaches. It's called criminal courtrooms. We do it all the time. So I think a lot of times what we do in criminal courtrooms actually has application here. And I always say it this way. Look, so let's say, how tall are you, Stelman? How tall are you?
5'8".
Okay, so you're 5'8". So you're a white male, 5'8", with brown hair and a goatee. Okay, great. Or beard. Okay, great. So I take you to jail, and I have evidence at the crime scene that it's your fingerprints, your DNA. I got people who saw you come and people who saw you leaving afterwards, covered in blood, all the things I would typically use to make a case. And now I bring you into trial, and I put you in front of a jury. And I've got, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I've got 35 pieces of evidence here that I am going to use, that the only reasonable inference at the end of it, you will decide, is that this young man is guilty of this murder. Now, could you imagine at the end of that, the defense attorney standing up and saying, well, wait, hey, hold on a minute. Okay, Stelman's a 5'8" white male with brown hair and a beard. Has the prosecutor shown you, did he work any other 5'8" white male with a beard? Do you know how many 5'8" white males with brown hair and beards there are in America? There's 1.7 million of these guys. Did he investigate all of those and make sure none of those fit this criteria? Now, how compelling would that be? Of course, that's ridiculous. If
right.
I've got good evidence that locks you in as the suspect, there's no need to go to potential suspect number 2, potential suspect number 3. There's no need for it. And I think that's what we do here. Now, you might have, if you have a table full of religious worldviews, and you want to go through them, and you just happen to pick them random, who should I do first? Pick one. But if the evidence for that one confirms the validity of that one, you're done. There is no need, because unless you think that God is so splintered and so schizophrenic that every single worldview, all of which contradict each other, they could all be wrong, but they can't all be true, because they make claims that are contradictory. So unless you think, because we've got this problem with the law of non-contradiction, and you think that all of these could be equally true at the same time, well, then go ahead and knock yourself out and look at all of them. But if you come to one, whatever one you pick first, if that one measures up and passes all the tests, you're done. And that's what happens here. Now, I looked at Mormonism probably more deeply than I looked at Christianity, because the only religious people I knew as an atheist was my stepmother and my 6 half siblings, 3 boys and 3 girls. So they were all Mormons. So I looked at it seriously. So I can only say that about one other religious worldview, but it doesn't matter any more than it would make sense that if I brought you to trial because you fit the description, you were seen at the crime scene, your DNA is at the crime scene, I'd be silly for someone to say, well, yeah, but there's 1.7 million other white guys he didn't check out. Okay, so I think that's a silly response. So the real question is, how strong is the case against Stelman? How strong is the case with Christianity? Knowing that he can't be, these two guys can't both be the killer. Only one is going to be. And so that there's a law of non-contradiction here. Same thing happens with these religious worldviews. They can't all be right because they don't make the same claim about God, the same claim about salvation, the same claim about the afterlife. These are very different claims. They could all be wrong. They can't all be right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And I think it's an especially unusual case for Jesus because he made such exclusive claims.
Yeah.
You know, he made the claim he's the only way to God. And so by definition, if that's true, there's no other way to God. The other religions don't check out. But also, if Jesus was wrong about what he claimed, well then
take him off the list.
Exactly. There's no place for him in your framework because
that's
Paul says the rest of it's irrelevant.
If you think he's some important teacher, well, important teachers don't make those kinds of false claims or those kinds of grandiose, self-asserting false claims. So I think that, you have to kind of change your definition of who Jesus is then. And by the way, it may be that people do that then. They say, okay, then fine, then Jesus is not even on my list. And what I'm looking at really is what is it, those four things that would make these reliable accounts, is simply, are they early enough to have been written by eyewitnesses? Is there any bit of touch point corroboration that can help us verify the accounts? Have they changed their story over time? And finally, do they possess the bias that we typically associate with liars? That's what we're looking for here. And this is the same template that everyone thinks is good enough to apply to witnesses in the most important, highest level criminal trials in which someone has died and someone may die going forward if there's a death penalty in that state. These are the highest level trials that we offer. The highest stakes are offered at these trials, and they're over the most egregious crimes. I think if someone's temporal future, either in a gas chamber or through lethal injection or life in prison, is at stake, and this is the criteria we use, why couldn't we use that criteria to look at someone's eternal destiny? I think we can do that. That's a decent, and by the way, there is no better, because the only standard above reasonable doubt as an SOP, the standard of proof, is beyond a possible doubt, and there's no way to get there. There's no way you're not beyond a possible doubt on anything you believe. If you're watching this video, you might be dreaming that. You might come here tomorrow and search for this video. You can't find it. This whole thing's, you might be in a matrix kind of universe. There are people who think the entire universe is nothing more than a computer simulation. All of this could be a lie. That always, as judges tell juries all the time, I can level a possible or imaginary doubt about anything. That's why the standard is not that high. It's reasonable doubt. That's as high as you can go. You can't get to possible. So that's why it's reasonable for us to apply that standard here.